Hello, everybody. You're listening to the Avanti Wellness Podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, aka Butterflydia. I'm embarking on my own transformational journey, and my intention is to inspire, inform, and support you all along the way. My hope is that we are all learning something new with each episode. So let's meet today's guest. Hello, everybody. This is Lydia. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Avanti Wellness. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to our guest. Her name is Amy Connell, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, but she wrote a book that was really fun to go through. It's called Your Worthy Body, and it's all about balancing the mind, body, and spirit, which is what Avanti Wellness is all about. So, hi, Amy.
Hi, Lydia. How are you?
We're doing good over here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I wish it was a little colder where I'm at.
We are both in sleeveless.
I know. That's awesome. I know.
Yeah.
And on one regard, it's nice for, getting out and taking a walk. But on the other hand, it's like, it's Christmas. I need some cold. I think the cold front's coming in. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but you wrote a book called, and we don't know each other. So this is our first time to really dive deep and get to know each other, but Your Worthy Body, Find Freedom in Health by Breaking All the Rules. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, maybe go back so the listeners can feel like they have a real understanding of, where you came from and what inspired you. And then we'll dive in a little bit deeper into your book and the topics.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. The way I like to introduce myself is to say I'm a personal trainer who wants you to take a day off and a nutrition coach who wants you to enjoy dessert, which are not typically, these are not typically things that you will hear from health and fitness professionals. I grew up moving. I grew up dancing. I did a lot of the, movement type stuff in high school. And then as a young adult, really got into group fitness, really loved it. I'm one of those people who just in her DNA, I feel like is just part of movement and feeling good and feeling powerful and all of that. But what really happened is this period of, well, I shouldn't say period, but I really was unhappy with my body for as long as I could remember. I remember having a lot of comparison issues as a teen. We were talking before we hit record that as a young adult, I wanted to have abs worthy enough of having a belly button ring. I never got one. Still haven't, probably never will. And that's just okay. And I really got into this space where I was over exercising. I was trying to work off all of these calories that I was shamefully ingesting. Having my own podcast and having other conversations with people, I realize now that I probably had somewhere in the spectrum of disordered eating where I was just way, way, way too focused on what I ate and how I ate and the macros and the calories. I have this
like
superpower,
the obsession.
The obsession. It was an obsession and really kind of filtered out into some of my personal life and really just spent way too long, super focused on trying to achieve this body that quite honestly, I was not designed to achieve. I'm 5'4" when I stand up really, really tall and a little bit on my toes.
Me too.
And, I was not born with this petite little body. I'm powerful. I'm muscular. It allows me to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do, but I just wasn't designed to look like the images that I saw growing up, which as a white woman born in 1974, all I saw was skinny white women. And there wasn't a whole lot else that was represented. Thankfully, now we are seeing that. And thankfully, we now have a broader representation of all bodies and shapes and colors and all of that. But I didn't have that. And I didn't see that. I wasn't aware of it. So I was really kind of on this path. And I got to a point where I'm a person of faith, and I just felt like there was a shift in a sermon that I heard one time, that it was, you take care of your body so you can do what you're called to do. And there were some other points that went along with that, but I realized that I needed to take care of my body so I could do the things that I really want to do when my husband and I are retired, or when I have grandkids, and so I can feel well, and so I can perform and love others and serve others and have the energy to do it and not be so tired. So that's kind of the longer version of where I am. But yeah, mostly I just want you to know that I am an imperfect eater. I'm a big believer in rest days, and have a real problem with the diet and health culture when they encourage people to just go, 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 go hard, 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 because in my opinion, that is not the secret to success.
I agree. What's funny is when you said imperfect eater, I was like, no, I think we can reframe that. I think you're a balanced eater. You eat some good and some bad, so it's balanced.
Well, I think, yes, that's a great way of saying it, Lydia. That's a really good point. And I would add to that, I'm a believer that there are no good foods and bad foods. There are foods that make me feel well, and then there are
Right.
foods that make me not feel well. And those are the ones that I typically avoid, but not always. And I pay for that, but that's okay. I know I'm going to.
Awesome. That reminds me, I want to go into this discussion just using nuggets and snippets from your book, so that the audience will see that your book is so well rounded. I want to compliment you, because I feel like right off the bat, I understood that you were focused on your mind, because that's where the title comes in. You're mixing the mind and the body piece of mind, body, and spirit just in the title. You're worthy, that's the mind, and your body is the physical. And I have as my listeners will learn, I've been struggling for many years on putting attention and time and desire on me having balance, and me finding the body piece of the mind, body, spirit. As I was mentioning before, I've really put a lot of focus on the mind and the spirit. And I was telling you that I really understand that without the mind component, the body piece will never be strong enough. Because when you have the bad days, when you have the bad life experiences that happen, if you just want to, one of your stories you were talking about, your friend texted you and she's like, I'm not getting results, I'm just going to give up. I mean, that's when the mind has to take over where the body is weak, right? So that's why it's important to build up the mind, right? So I love your focus of your book, and I'm complimenting you because you're heavily focused on the mind and the spiritual, to make the parts where we're all imperfect in our bodies stronger, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that just in general, like what comes to mind when I bring that conversation up.
Well, it's really interesting that you are putting that together, and I love how you brought to light to me. I wrote this book, and I worked on the title, and that the worthiness and the body aspect are actually two parts of your mind and your body. So thank you for that, actually. But yeah, Lydia, you bring up such a great point that I'm still learning about too. As an active person, I've always just kind of been in this mindset of, I'm just going to take care of my body. And basically I would walk in, or I would go for the run, or whatever it was I was doing, and just focus on the physical aspect of it. What I have really been learning, honestly, over the last 2 years primarily, is how our body and our mind are so intricately connected, and how, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Body Keeps a Score.
Oh, no, that sounds interesting.
it's really interesting. And I'm linking on it's Bessel van der Kolk, I think. I think he's
wow, that's a tongue twister.
Yeah, he's a doctor. Well, I think he's from Germany, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it's a fascinating book. It's deep and it's heavy, but it talks about how your body responds so much to the mental aspect of where we are, particularly to trauma, but in general. And as I have been learning more, I can tell it sounds super woo woo, but it's so true. Like,
I'm totally woo woo. So let's go there.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell when I'm stressed and I'm feeling it in my hip flexors, because that is, and I actually had to have a guest on my podcast teach me some about that, about how that's your body bringing you back in and, keeping you close and keeping you tight. So that way you won't injure yourself. I am learning that I store my stress in my chest. I'm learning all of these different things, and that will manifest itself in how I move. And so if I'm not keeping my head in the right spot, and when I say in the right spot, if I'm not acknowledging my feelings, if I'm not working through the challenges that I'm having, all of these ways.
Let's dig that deeper. Like, responding to your feelings about relationships or your clients or challengers or COVID. Like, these are real life scenarios where your feelings are generated thoughts. That's what you're talking about specifically.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Life,
absolutely.
The feelings of life that happen. If you're not checking in with that, you're about to say that, it can hurt you.
Well, yeah. I mean, it can work itself out into becoming injured. So, it can increase your inflammation, the stress in your body, and it increases that cortisol, and that cortisol can be good for you when you're working out in some ways, but in other ways, you get extra of it, and it can create other issues, and then you can get injured. And a lot of my conversations, either with my own clients or on my podcast or, through this book, revolve around not getting injured and not hurting yourself. I'm 47 years old. And, the reality is all of us, as we age, we don't heal as well. And so it's really important to me to be able to do what I love doing and continue doing that. But if it is so much more holistic than lacing up your shoes and going for a run. And that's great if you're doing that. But there are a lot of other elements to me that I find fascinating that have, helped me to feel more at peace and more at balance when it comes to looking at my overall health, my physical health, my mental health, my spiritual health. And I just feel like when I'm paying attention to all of that, I have a deeper calmness in me rather than always feeling this angst of whatever I'm doing is not enough, and I should be doing this, and I need to be doing this, and I was supposed to do this, and I didn't get it done, and all of that stuff. So I don't know that
No,
if that
totally.
By
the way, since you don't know me, you don't know that I'm like an energy worker and I'm an empath and an intuitive. So I get it. Like, I'm all about the energy, which is the thoughts, and how that translates into a lot of times with energy work, you have to figure out where in the body do you feel that feeling?
Yeah. So for me, it's right in my chest. Yeah. For me, it's in my chest.
And it moves depending on the feeling, or the experience. You talked about trauma early on, about how the body stores trauma. Well, I experienced at 22 a very great trauma. And I talk about it in my intro, and I'll just mention it quickly. I don't need to go into it, but basically my sister committed suicide in front of me. And it was a shock. And that trauma.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Like, how do you live beyond that? Right. I mean, that was my quest, was survival, how to decide how to choose life over, I could check out too, because this is pretty painful. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because it matters. The trauma is stored in the body. And sometimes if your trauma is in your body, you don't want to face it. So you do everything else. I did things that were easier for me. I worked on my mind. I worked on my spirituality because I was just trying to survive. It was no longer about, how do I want to look? It was about survival. Okay. So that's at 22 took me onto a different path and to a different journey, so that while my friends were finding life mates, having children, building their careers, my focus was survival.
Yeah.
So, so that set me on a journey. And so I am 53 and I'm so ready to focus the same amount of time and attention that I put into that mind and body. I need to balance some of that out, bring it home to focus it on the body, which is why I created this podcast and why we're talking about your wonderful book. That's so cool that God brought you into my life, because your book is about balance. And I love that, because I don't really think that a lot of people put enough attention on the mind and the spirit. And so let me bring you to the conversation of how you got to, because where you take us in your book is we have to figure out our own why. And I have to admit, one of my things is I like to be authentic, so my audience members can learn about, life is not easy. But I've really struggled over the years with my why, because it keeps moving, it keeps changing, right? So let's have the conversation about the why, because I know yours was really strong. You touched on it in your intro. Do you want to tell a little bit more about this story, and we can talk about whys? Because I think that's where, to be honest with you, I think that that's the key that unlocks the desire for the commitment, the kind of commitment that you were just getting out there and going for a run. Personally, I think I've done a lot of thinking about this. I feel like people do movement for different reasons. If you feel anxious, when you go move, you find out that your endorphins make you feel better and you're calmer. So some people do movement because they feel better. Some people do movement because they're depressed. And when you move, the same thing, the endorphins affect your feelings. So people have different reasons for movement, right? But when it comes to just doing it because, you want to look better or something, sometimes that's not a big enough why. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, that's what they call an extrinsic motivation, or an extrinsic why. So that's something that is not internally motivated, or it's so you can look a particular way, or have a number on the scale. Because the reality is, even if your why is, well, I just want to look really good, well, you're still going to have bad days. You're still going to get in challenges with your relationships. You're still going to have, a problem at work, or fill in the blank. Right. So, but having those intrinsic whys is what will keep you going. And I love that you pointed on the endorphins. So actually the science is that if you can get out and move at a moderate level for 20 minutes or more, and when I say moderate, I mean like, just walking and you're slightly breathless, but you can still carry on a conversation. That's when those endorphins kick in. So, and there's a really fantastic book out there by a woman named Dr. Kelly McGonigal called The Joy of Movement. And if you want to get motivated to move from a more of an intrinsic perspective, and also from a mental health perspective, that's a really good one too, because there's also, I'm sorry, I don't remember the data off the top of my head, but it's that you can really keep your mental health at a good level through continuous, exercise and movement. And I want to say that, and I want to layer on there that absolutely, positively, sometimes, and often we need the help with a professional, to partner with a professional in that. So I believe that exercise can help our head and our mental health, but that's not always the only thing. Sometimes we need a professional. Sometimes there's a lot of
and we're talking about, you need to work on your mind, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about. That's the therapist. That's the coach. That's the whomever.
Right.
It's the help.
Right. But my own why really, it used to be to have some sort of physical aspect. It was so I could look a certain way. It was so I could reach a certain goal on the scale. It was, I mean, just, to have those belly button, that belly button ring in my abs. And what it has turned into is, I think this is what you're talking about with the key for me is I take care of my body so I can do what I'm called to do. As a person of faith, I'm always trying to, and not that you have to be a person of faith to do this, but I'm trying to love others in the way that my model loved others. I'm trying to serve others, trying to help, however I can for the greater good of humanity. And there are a lot of different ways, and I can go into that if you want, of having a different type of calling. Sometimes people hear that word and they just think it's like this really big, okay, Lydia, you will now go
the burning bush,
do this.
If you didn't have a burning bush,
if you're familiar,
not a calling.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're familiar with stories from the Old Testament, it's this Moses in the burning bush and God saying, go save my people. And that might be a calling, but that's not always a big, that's what I call a macro calling. So it's like a really big one, but a micro one might be, okay, I need to make sure that I have a good solid breakfast. So that way I'm not hungry and I'm thinking clearly for my interview with Lydia at 11 o'clock. So, that's more of a micro one. And so that way I can bring to you and I can serve you and your community with information that will help them. So that, that's more of a micro one. I don't know if you want me to list the others that I have in the book. There may be more. But
no, why don't you share? I loved how you identified those and how you laid those out. Cause I always think about those, like Oprah has a thing like first you get a whisper. She calls them like it's a whisper, and then you get a tap on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And you get a slap in the face, and then you get a brick in the head.
Yeah. But I've gotten those bricks in the head.
That's her macro, that's her macro.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if you want to, what are your categories? I liked your names that you picked out for those. They're micro.
Yeah. So I talked about the macro, that big burning bush, or the big, like, okay, we're going to go do this. The micro, which is kind of the smaller ones, very more specific. I have a seasonal calling. And so that might be that you're supposed to do something for a period of time. Maybe that's a week, maybe that's a couple months, maybe that's a couple years, and then you move on. My son had a friend, in middle school. So he's getting ready to graduate from high school, but this was several years ago. But I remember her mom was dealing with middle school girl drama, angst, all of that, and she said, what I told her was, sometimes you have these friends and they're a reason, season, or lifetime. And I had never heard that. And she talked about how sometimes your friends just come in and they're there for a period of time and then they go. And that doesn't mean that friendship was not sacred or cherished. It just means that that's where they were then. And I think that sometimes our callings can be that way too. Like we are supposed to do something for a period of time. And then if we're paying attention to the whisper and the tap on the shoulder, and hopefully we don't get the brick on the head, then we move on to something else. So that's a seasonal calling. I have what's called a servanthood calling. Sometimes we need to be available and to help other people who might be doing greater things. You can call it a right-hand man. You can, I don't know if a wingman is an appropriate example here. It's a support role. Yeah, it's a support role. And that doesn't mean that it's any less important. It just means that is your role in that. Yeah. And then the final one that I have is a creative calling. I think that sometimes we're really quick to discount how meaningful things can be to others that are so innate to us. The example I use in the book is I have a friend who's an amazing artist, and she just paints these fantastic paintings and she'll gift them to people. And that will warm my heart when I get those, or people who just give amazing dinner parties and they bring people together. And I'm a huge believer in just this, like, there is nothing more soul nourishing to me than getting with a bunch of my girlfriends and we're sitting around the table and we are enjoying all the things and we're laughing until we have tears coming down our face. Like, that is so nourishing to me. And if someone has the gift and the creative calling to be able to say, hey, everybody come over and let's have dinner and appetizers and wine and dessert, and we're doing that, that is such a blessing to me.
Yeah, hosting is a gift.
Yeah, and it really is. And I think sometimes we have this tendency to say, like, but I don't have a burning bush, and so I don't have a calling. Well, no, you actually do. It's just manifesting itself differently. And so it's important to remember that. But the whole overlying thing of where I'm coming from is I still need to take care of myself so I can do that. So I can have the energy to make a big dinner party. So I can have the energy to, not that I paint, but if they were painting from that example, whatever it is, and to be able to think clearly, to be able to sleep well beforehand, to be able to move and do different things. If you have moms with young children, I mean, that is physically exhausting. I don't know how I ever did it, and how people, I mean, like, that's so
when
exhausting.
And so 4 kids.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So that's part of it too, right? Taking care of ourselves, putting foods in our body that we know where they came from in the earth, moving our bodies so we're strong enough so that if we pick up our child and we trip, that we're able to catch ourselves rather than falling, or heaven forbid, dropping our child or hurting ourselves in the process. And so physically being able to do all of the aspects of our daily life and live out those callings, and doing it with while flourishing, because we have taken care of ourselves.
Yeah. You talk a lot about how you feel about yourself, or how you feel about, you're like the worthy part of your title, you focus on that. And I think that's important to highlight when you were talking about sometimes you can have a friend for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And in my understanding, I've actually heard that before, like many years ago, because when friends come and go, here's the worthy part. Sometimes you can feel bad about why a friend may come, or like a partner. I don't know if you dated before you got married, but when you have partners and you think like, oh, this is the one, but that person doesn't think you're the one, and so they go, and like, am I going to feel unworthy because somebody else deems me, not fit for their partnership or whatever, so that's where it's so important to focus on, how you internally feel about you, because you're the one who's driving this, physical body around. I also just wanted to mention in that conversation about one of the things that I subscribe to and believe in is that we all have a frequency, and like frequency attracts like frequency. So like right now, I mean, I never met you until, 2 weeks ago when I connected with you on the internet. And here we are having a like-minded conversation because our frequencies are in the same space right now. So we were drawn to connect and to find each other. So when relationships go away, it might be that your frequency is no longer in alignment. So you don't have to feel bad about that, especially if you feel good about your frequency, about where you're vibrating from. And so I just think that we need understanding and reasons for why things happen so that we can navigate our lives better and feel more like we're driving instead of life is driving us, right?
Yeah.
So it's all a part of what this is all about, which is how do you get control of yourself, your body, your decisions, your choices, your mind. And the why is the piece that keeps you on track, right?
Right.
The
right.
why.
When things don't go right or go like you think they should, and they won't, that's what keeps you focused on staying the course. For sure.
Absolutely. So do you want to share with the listeners kind of the interior part of your book where you talk about the kind of pillars of what's kind of key to help you stay in the goals that you want to achieve for yourself, because you're always talking about balance, no matter if you're talking about diet or exercise or what. So do you want to tap on some of those things about the book?
Sure. So if I can just give a really quick overview of it, this, as you said, the title is Your Worthy Body. And then the subtitle is Find Freedom and Health by Breaking All the Rules. So as someone who has been really, really focused on all of the health and fitness rules, and by nature is a rule follower, by the way, I am one of those people pleasing, rule following kind of girls. What I did was I took not all, but I took 22 different health and fitness rules that have been set forth either by the fitness industry or diet culture, or you've seen on, the internet or the morning shows. I mean, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is some science, but what happens is people will grab hold of a little bit of that science, and then this is one of my favorite words, fetishize it. So they take it to an extreme level. And I could give you all kinds of examples from a fitness perspective of what that is, but I take these rules or myths, however you want to say them, and I break them using exercise science, using nutritional science. And then the book is done through a lens of faith. So it's broken up into 3 different sections. The first section I call the warm up. So I kind of patterned it after an exercise class, so the first part is the warm up. And that's where I really focus on the mindset and shifting our mindset about why we take care of ourselves, and really encouraging a lot of grace giving over all of that. Then the second part is called Get Her Done. And that's where I dig into some more of the technical things that we may have heard, like no pain, no gain, or walking isn't a real workout, or it's all about the nutrients, and these things that we have heard. And then the final portion is the cool down, which, just like when I am training my clients and leading classes, the cool down is probably not long enough. It's only 2 chapters, but because sometimes I don't cool down my clients long enough. Unfortunately, we're always working on things. But yeah, I mean, I would say in the beginning, one of the chapters that seems to really resonate with a lot of women is the chapter called Walking Isn't a Real Workout. Because we have heard, I mean, look, we are recording this in December. How many commercials for gym memberships have we and will we see between now and later? And indoor bicycling commercials, or, I mean, there's a whole lot of different things, and they're great. If you find something and do something and enjoy it. Like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but we have forgotten that our bodies were made to walk. And there are a lot of wonderful benefits to walking. It's a low impact option. It can give you those endorphins that we talked about earlier. It can help with your blood pressure. It can be an opportunity for you to get with other people who are meaningful to you and walk with them and develop your relationships with them. I'm losing some of the other ones, but there are a lot of wonderful benefits to walking. It can strengthen your core, believe it or not. When you walk, stand with your shoulders back and kind of engage that core, which means that, if you knew someone was going to come up and punch you in the gut, you would kind of pull that your belly button back and tighten up your abs. That's basically engaging your core. That's the short way of saying it. But it can, because of the science of it's called ground force response, I think, that can help with your core strength when you're walking with good posture. So walking 100% is a good workout. We just have a lot of other people trying to get our attention and our money of why, of other ways of working out. And again, those are great. And I love being actually, I don't love indoor cycling. I will admit that. But the other things, I feel like a hamster when I did it. I remember teaching. I used to teach it, and I would look out, and I'm like, all these people just spinning. No, but you know what? I know that there's been a lot of ups and downs and people love it and then it's canceled and all of that business, but I think Peloton has a great offering. So if that's something that you want to do, go for it. But don't forget that you can also get a great workout by strapping on some or lacing up some shoes and going outside and walking, and you get the fresh air and you get the vitamin D. So anyway, that's one example of, we have this mindset of like, oh, well, it's not a real workout if I'm not huffing and puffing, or if I'm not sweating and, um, everything else. But it's a wonderful complement to a lot of different exercising. And if you're just starting out, that's the number one thing I recommend to do, is get outside and walk.
That's great, Amy. And I agree with you. I actually have a cool story. Like one time, I got really committed to my why, and I got dedicated to wanting to drop a bunch of weight. And I got on my treadmill at, in the morning for an hour. That's all I did, was just walking. Then I got on my treadmill at night for an hour. And that was kind of my commitment, that I really was trying to do fast track weight loss. So I was really committed to this extra exercise. Like I knew that if I just did what was normal, like going for a regular walk, that wouldn't get me further down my goal. I had to be like extraordinary with my activity. And so, I mean, it was just walking. So it wasn't like major. It was just getting on a treadmill, and I watched the Dr. Phil show taped on my VHS in the morning. And then I'd watch the Oprah show at the, in the night. So it was like really working my mind and my body at the same time. Anyway, in 6 months, I lost 90 pounds by myself from walking. Wow. And eating really clean. I wasn't eating a lot of carbs. I was eating a lot of spinach. And the difference that I did was like 2 ounces of protein with like a spinach, like a couple times a day. So I was eating like 5 times a day. The challenge with that is you can know what to do. Like I know what to do, but when your why is not there, you don't have any motivation to actually do it, so that's why I'm focusing so much on the why, get your why. And you have, lots of people tell you what to do. People like you can read books and find out how to manage diet and exercise and achieve it. But unless you have your why, it's not going to happen. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes it really hard to be sustainable. Anyone can power through for a period of time, but in order to be able to find something that works for the long run and that you can do, and that's not going to wear you down mentally, and it's not going to wear you down physically, then you've got to find that sustainability and layer the why over that, for sure.
That's a great segue. Let's talk about sustainability. What do you, any tips that you have for your clients or people that you're talking to regarding how to make it last? Like, how do you keep your why strong? How do you continue on? How do you not let it all go and just say, screw it?
Well, I think the biggest aspect is finding the things that you can do for a while and starting small, which nobody wants. Everybody wants a really quick response. They want to be able to see results or feel results yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard when it takes a long time. I have, you and I were talking before we got on that I have a chapter in there that was prompted by a text I received from a friend, which is the chapter title is "It's a Waste of Time If I Don't Lose Weight," because often that's what we're looking at. And because that's what we've been trained to look at. And there are times that our bodies need to be lighter from a medical perspective, from a, from a blood work perspective. And when our focus is, then we get frustrated when that doesn't happen. And then when we get frustrated, then we're like, well, screw it. Why bother?
Yeah.
Where
That's
again,
a spiral.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a spiral. But I think that when we make the small efforts and the small things, then we can do those on a longer period of time. So not to pick on your example, but with the walking, like the treadmill that's great. And it sounds like you were doing some really great things. In my, like 2 hours, that's a hell of a long time to be doing that every day.
I was watching TV shows, so it helped me stay on there.
Yeah.
My mind was occupied.
But it might be that it's like, you know what, if I feel like I have to do 2 hours, then I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
I have another chapter in the book called I have to get my hour of exercise in, because as someone who grew up in the health industry and going to group fitness classes, all of those fitness classes are 55 minutes long. And so you feel shortchanged if it's 53 minutes long. So I mean, people they get really irritated if you end up in class, just a few minutes early.
That's funny.
And so it's changing this. So yeah, a lot of it is, I mean, going back to the sustainability, what can we do that we feel is realistic for us to do a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? And of course, things will change and your body will change. For women, we're in this kind of perimenopause, menopausal state. That change, your hormones will change, absolutely change things. And that may change how you eat and how you move. However, figuring out what you can do that is sustainable, I think, is the key to success and to feeling good about what you're doing, rather than just having that quick hit, getting the quick result that you're wanting, and then just saying, okay, well, we're done. Because the reality is, taking care of ourselves is a process. I mean, just like you and I are probably very different than we were when we were in our 30s. Our bodies are different, and it's just a lifelong process of figuring out what works now, figuring out what I can do now that's sustainable, that's realistic, and going from there, rather than getting so focused on having immediate results.
Yeah.
Not very sexy. I'm sorry. That's like not a very exciting answer, but I think it's the truth. And if we talked more about that and less about before and after pictures, then we would probably all feel more successful and confident in our own personal journey of what is working for us.
Right. One thing I love about your book too is you really highlight for the individual to find out their pathway. There's not one pathway. There's not one right direction, that everybody needs to figure out what their journey is going to be to achieve their success. You're just supporting us, like, go, Lydia, go.
Right.
Find it, figure it out. That's kind of what
exactly
I took from the book. And so I like that, because you're not telling me like these set of rules that you talk about, that you like to follow. Some people have aversion to rules and restriction. My theme, my whole life that I figured out, is freedom. I love freedom. And that's in my job, in my career, in my relationships, in my lifestyle. Like, I want freedom so bad. Like, I don't know why that's the driver. Maybe, you probably don't believe in past lives, but maybe in a past life I was in a prison or something. And so now I'm trying to outlive those feelings in my current lifetime, of freedom. But like, all my decisions are based on, does this make me feel free when I think of something? And so I have to, there are laws of the there's laws of physics, there's laws of nature, there's laws of health, like the body there's science around things that the body needs. So I do have to live within laws. I can't just be willy-nilly, but it's finding, even if it's a mental decision, that I'm still free. Like, I'm going to give an example. And I've had a lot of thought about these topics, but one of the examples that, and I'm just giving you like a real client's, conversation, but there's the one side of my coin where I say, I want to be free to eat whatever I want. That's, I think, a traditional, typical, I think most people can relate to that thought, right? Mm-hmm. Because that, and I'm telling myself, because that gives me freedom. I'm saying that a little bit facetiously because there's another side of my freedom. So carrying the weight on my body, not fitting comfortably in, you know, a seat or a chair, or, you know, it being difficult to go to the Rockets game and climb up all the way to the top of the roof where I pay for the cheap tickets, you know, like, is that freedom? Is that freedom to have struggle doing those things, or to be uncomfortable in an airplane seat, or whatever? Like, I can find reasons why I don't feel free in other areas. So it's like a fantasy. It's
a great point. Yes.
I have done a lot of thought about this, because there's a part of you that is your ego that's probably saying, I want to do whatever I want. I don't want any constraints. But where is the opposite? There's like a yin and yang of everything, right? There's an equal and opposite. Mm-hmm. So my mind has to go to help me find the why, and the why I'm not free. What areas of my life does my weight hinder me from my freedoms that I could experience? And then that's why I've got to tap in to those feelings instead of the feelings that chocolate cake's going to bring me freedom, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what you're also doing is you're trying, there's this term that I use a lot called being kind to your future self. So what you're choosing to do in those moments is to allow yourself, your future self, to experience those freedoms that you're wanting to. And right now saying no to your current self, even though your taste buds may really want that, you know that your ultimate goal is to be able to climb up the stairs or sit comfortably in a seat or whatever that is, and feel good in that and feel freedom. And it is, Lydia, it's so difficult and tricky, and I think it's a struggle for a lot of people in their own, within their own stories. But yeah, of like, what will saying no now, and not no in a shameful way
or restrictive way,
but in a responsive way of, oh, actually, even though I'm wandering into the pantry and I'm grabbing the Lay's potato chips, because that's like my favorite thing. I love Lay's potato chips. I'm actually not hungry. So maybe I don't need to have these now, but I can have some later with my salad when I am hungry, and just paying attention to that. But yeah, I think that's absolutely a struggle that a lot of people have in finding that balance. And I have walked with that, through that, and in it too, because I still have my own struggles with that, for sure. Are you familiar with the intuitive eating method?
Where you kind of sit mindfully and you look at your plate and you just decide, like, do I really want that? Like, what? I don't know if I know the book or whatever.
Yeah, there's a book out there that there are 10 pillars of it. And I have to be totally honest, like I haven't read the book, but I have spoken with some other.
You intuitively know it's good.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is trying to figure out what you need. It is being super mindful of what you're eating. I tell you one thing I started doing like this week, because I love sitting down. I think it's because I used to sit down and I'd watch my dad have his breakfast and read the paper, like the real physical paper, growing up. And so I love like reading and, reading when I eat. Well, what that's turned into is mindless scrolling when I eat. And I have just started putting everything aside, and I just eat, and I'm by myself most days during the week. And that I can tell them and I hate using the word mindfulness of that, because sometimes it's overused and people are like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm mindful. I know what I'm eating. I'm fine. But when I just pay attention to it, I've noticed a difference in how I feel and being able to respond when my body's like, yeah, we've had enough. I'm like, okay, rather than just keeping eating and probably eating more than I need to, because I'm focused on whatever the Apple News is showing me for the day.
I like what you said. I had a little bit of an aha moment while you were talking. I just want to share it, is when we were talking about like the saying no to this, whatever it is, the Lay's potato chips, you're using that example, or, I call that like, that's restriction and resistance, because it's kind of in a negative form. The answer of no is negative. But instead, what is the affirmative? And instead of saying, I'm going to say no to Lay's, this is my aha. I could say yes to Y, the XYZ. Like, instead of saying, I'm going to say no to this, actually, in this choice, I'm going to say yes to feeling good in my pants, or I'm going to say yes to looking good in a bathing suit. I'm going to say, and you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a mind trick, because if you feel like you're saying no, you feel deprivation.
Right.
But if you're affirming yes to something else, you're gaining something. I'm getting something.
I love it. I love it. Hold on to that.
I just had that aha moment when you were talking about the Lays. So so let's we've been talking for about 50 minutes. So let's go ahead and talk about like your last chapter, where you say let me read it. Go hard or go home. What is that about?
There is this mindset sometimes that we hear about, well, if you're going to show up, and if you're going to do something, that you better do it at your 100% level. And if you're not even going to give your 100% level, then don't even bother coming. Nothing could be further from the truth. And you can see me. I know people, I hope they can hear me, like feeling my shoulders scrunch up and getting that
You're
face.
Like a thermometer. Like, the red is coming up the thermometer.
Yes. It drives me crazy. This prevents us from doing so many wonderful things. I can't tell you how many times we have said in my own household, something is better than nothing. If you don't have an hour, then do 30 minutes. If you don't have a 30 minutes, do 11 minutes. I was actually talking to one of my dear friends is a personal trainer, and she was like, oh my gosh, she goes, I do 8-minute hit intervals sometimes, and that's it. And we were laughing about how people think that we, because we're trainers, we work out all the time. I'm like, I probably work out less than most of the people that I work with, that I train.
You're always busy.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even busy. It's just that I know how to be smart about it, and I know how to get in and I do something. And then sometimes I don't get something done, and I give myself grace. But this concept of we have to go all in and give it 100%. And if we're not, then don't even bother showing up. That's dumb. It's which is not a very eloquent way of saying it, but it prevents us from taking those small steps, from having that sustainability that we talked about earlier, from being kind to our future self, because not every workout needs to be a huffing, puffing, sweaty, breathless, red-faced workout. Sometimes, and I would actually, and I talk about this elsewhere in the book, but they shouldn't be, and you will get hurt if you do that. And so this mentality of, if it's not going to be worth it if you don't give it your all, I think prevents the general public from doing the things that they could do and that they could thrive in doing. But they feel like, they feel shameful if, they've showed up and they didn't sleep well, and they're just like, you know what, I'm just here. I'm just showing up. And this mentality that like, well, no, don't even show up if you're not going to give it your all. That's just BS.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm relating to another story about, a time in my life when I did have success losing weight. And I was in college my senior year, and I would go to class and probably like do a walk in the morning. And then I had like a break between, say, like 12 and 5, because I had to go to work, and I worked at a pizza place where I was a waitress at a pizza place. And I would just, my thought process was, if all I could do was just walk around the block, go for a walk around the block. If you have 15 minutes and you just can do a normal style walk around the block, not even change into workout clothes or whatever, just go do that. And I created that habit where I just told myself, it doesn't have to be a workout. It could be just a walk around the block. And I implemented that, your mindset that you're talking about. If you can't do a full on workout, don't do anything. I did just the walk around the block, and, I had success. I did lose 50 pounds in like 4 or 5 months, but I was also, food restricting and, doing a lot of other things. But I remember that habit, that behavior of my mindset was just go for the walk around the block, and it'll be better than not going for the walk around the block,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
these things you're sharing, I have real world memories of when I implemented those types of things and it worked.
Yeah.
So I'm just validating.
Well, it
what you're
is.
saying makes sense.
Yeah. And actually, well, it does. Yes, it does. And I'm glad that you have those experiences. I mean, what you're talking about too is something that is an acronym of NEAT, NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is just a really super fancy scientific way of saying movement that's not exercise.
Yeah.
And so what the studies and what, I say that this book has exercise science in it. So the exercise science of it is that can have a huge metabolic effect, which basically raising your metabolism just by moving around more throughout the day. We are in such a sedentary lifestyle, and it's really easy. I mean, you and I are sitting here. We've been sitting here for over an hour, and and we need to get up and move around and walk around.
Let me get on my rebounder while we're doing a podcast.
Well, it's funny. I actually have one of those uplift desks. And so sometimes I'll stand and sometimes I'll sit for that very reason. Like I want to be able to stand and move around, but sitting is better for me when I do interviews, because otherwise I tend to get a little, I move too much. But anyway, yeah. So what you're talking about has exercise science validation that just moving. And again, that's not going hard, but that sure is better than doing nothing. And it sure will give you some really wonderful benefits.
Yes. Awesome. You have been such a delight. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you're in my city and that we can create a community around the community where we met. That's exciting. I appreciate you thank you for sharing just this wonderful message with the world and writing this book. I know you wrote the chapter about during COVID is when you wrote this. This is your COVID baby manifestation. And it's beautiful, by the way. The book cover and I'm in marketing, the font, the book cover. Like I'm noticing all these things in it. And I like the aesthetic, the physical feeling. Like, is this a new way of doing book covers? Because it feels good too. Like, it is a gorgeous book. And on the inside and outside, and I can say that because I had nothing to do with any of that. I mean, I didn't design it. I had a fantastic book cover designer. I did. And actually the back of the book, he did in one setting. And I gave him all the copy. Yes. You just said yes. I gave him the copy, and he sent it back, and it was just gorgeous. And it was nothing that I had envisioned, and it was perfect. That's awesome. And then I had an interior designer, who did all of the inside. So you can see, every chapter has a resource. Not every chapter, most chapters have a resource. And she really brought those to life, because what I wanted the reader to have is some applicable information that they could put into practice now. And some of them are workouts. Some of them are just 5 minutes of warming up or cooling down. Some of them go through actually like how to perform particular movements. I have recipes in there. I have journal prompts. I have metric scorecards. So I really wanted it to be interactive and something that you could do. But like a workbook.
Yeah. But the inside, like I told her, I said, look, my readers are women in their 40s and 50s, and our eyes are not very good. So she made the font bigger. Yes. She pulled it apart so it's easier to read.
I love that.
Yes. I tried to make it where it was really easy to pick up, read a certain section and put down. So there's lots of subheaders. There's lots of breaking points. I read a lot at night. And so I can go from alert to asleep in about 22 seconds. Me so too. It was like you can read it and then easily find a place where you can put it down. So I really wanted it to be a pleasant and enjoyable experience for the reader, where it wasn't, why give them something hard to read if I'm trying to give this message of grace and freedom.
Yeah. And by the way, I love your name, Grace Health.
Thank you.
Health. Yeah. Tell everybody who might be resonating with you, how do they connect with you? Where do they find you?
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes, you can, first of all, you can purchase the book on Amazon. Just type in Your Worthy Body, Amy Connell. And then everywhere else I am known by, or I go by the name of Graced Health, GRACED. I hang out the most on Instagram. I have on my homepage, which is just gracedhealth.com. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter that I just send out once a month because I don't like too many emails, but that is a place where I share just things that I'm loving and I think you'll love. So sometimes it's foods or recipes or workouts or music. I really dig different kinds of music. I have a dog named Grace. She's a stray pit bull who we took in, and she's on my Instagram a lot. But yeah, so Instagram is probably the best place to connect with me. I am on Facebook. I have a Facebook community group that I'm trying in 2022 to pay more attention to and to foster better. But that's the best way to get a hold of me. Sign up for the email list. You'll get lots of fun things, and then find me over on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I really, truly appreciate, number one, meeting you.
You too.
And then taking the time to have this dialogue. And thank you for allowing me to interject, my personal experiences to just integrate with, what you're sharing and the message that you're teaching. So,
well, I'm so glad you did. Thank you for that, because I think too that we're all sitting at a point where we have different stories and different experiences. But as Maya Angelou said, we are all more alike than unalike. And I think that is true even in the health world. That's
a great tie-in. I have another podcast called Oneness Junkie, and that's exactly the premise, that we are more oneness is that we're all connected, and that we have more things in common than we do that are different. And so we just need to highlight the things that make us similar, and it'll create more compassion, peace, and acceptance around the planet. So thank you for that. So anyway, I appreciate your time, and I really look forward to, maybe you'll be able to come on again and we can talk about another subject in 2022.
Sounds great. I'd be honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Well, you have a good holiday, and we'll talk to you later.
You too.
Bye-bye. We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this motivational journey, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss out each time we load a new episode. If you have an inspirational story to share or want to let us know about a potential guest, we'd love to hear about it. Contact us at avantiwellness.com. See you next time, and remember, change is good.